Hey guys, this is Earnest James, host of the Deal to Heal with E. James podcast, and I got a question to ask you. Could you buy me a cheeseburger? Better yet, could you buy me a value meal? Yes? Well, guess what? I don't need a value meal. However, for the cost of a value meal, you can support this podcast to keep us on the air. Just go to Patreon/Deal to Heal podcast and choose any one of the three tiers that's available. And if you just want to make a one-time donation, go to Cash App and make a donation to $E James, the number 418. Make a one-time donation to the Cash App, or again, go to Patreon to support this podcast and keep us on the air. Thanks in advance. Be blessed. Welcome to Deal to Heal with E. James podcast. On this podcast, my guest and I will discuss topics and ways to help us to heal in every area of our lives. I believe that everyone can live a life that is happy, healthy, and whole. So I'm on a mission to help people to deal, heal, and fulfill. Deal with your problem, heal from the pain, and fulfill your purpose. Thanks for tuning in. Let's get to it. Welcome to the Deal to Heal with E. James podcast. I'm your host, Earnest James, and I believe that everyone can live a life that is healed, healthy, and whole. So I'm on a mission to help people to deal, heal, and fulfill. Deal with your problems, heal from the pain, and fulfill your purpose. And again, I would like to welcome you to the Deal to Heal with E. James podcast. We are in our second season, and this is episode number 19. All right, and also today we have I'm doing something a little different. So this is going to be a special episode. We're going to do something a little different than our usual format, because I wanted to take the time to not only express myself and get to know myself, or let the audience get to know myself a little bit more as a podcaster, but I've got some of my podcaster friends here also, and we just going to have a conversation to get to know each other that way that you can get to know us also. So again, I am Ernest James, E. James, host of the Deal to Heal with E. James podcast, and also I have Aisha here today. How are you doing?
Hi, hey everybody.
All right, Aisha, just introduce yourself a little bit, and also let them know the podcast that you are over.
So my name is Aisha Morgan, and I am the host of Conversations with the Black Girl Blogger podcast. And on my podcast, I interview people from a wide range of topics, all Black and brown people, just so that they can tell their stories about triumph and overcoming just situations that sometimes seem minuscule until you start diving into the actual story of it and realize just how much they've overcome. I've learned so much from my podcast, and it's just been a pleasure.
Okay. And also we have my man up here too, and I hope I pronounce it right, Kesheaf.
That's correct.
Okay, that's correct. Okay, and he's on here. He's going to tell us a little bit about his podcast also.
Yes, I am Kesheaf. My last name is Kennedy. My podcast is the Creative RU podcast. And the reason that I named it Creative RU is because I found myself commonly getting into the same conversations with many people before I even thought about having a podcast. I have a passion about, just people being dialed into their purpose. So like one of the main conversations that I strike up with individuals that I'm getting to know is I ask them, like, what are you passionate about? Because, I like to see people in their element. I like to kind of get people's gears going as far as, just what they're passionate about. And I find out that a lot of people don't give that question a thought. They don't ask them that. They don't ask themselves that question as much. And then I find out that they don't qualify themselves as creative. So this podcast is for individuals that qualify themselves as non-creatives, because I believe that everyone is creative. It's just that, it doesn't look the same on everyone. So, you know, I just, I like to get people's gears going, let them know that they're creative, and that you can apply creativity to pretty much everything that you do.
Okay. And first of all, let me tell both of y'all, thank y'all very much for being on here. You guys could have been doing anything right now, but you're here with me, and I definitely appreciate it. And I definitely got to give props off to you for the new intro music. Again, this is season number 2. You know what I mean? So I had to switch
That's
it up,
cool.
switch up the intro music so I can be able to monetize, because that old person that I had for the first season, I'm sure ain't sending me nothing. So so I had to change it up. So I definitely appreciate you for that. And you know what? I just want, like I said, I wanted to have this platform, to open up this platform, just so we can kind of get to know each other, get to know each other of our life, before podcasting, and, our life now, and also our lives, the future of where we see our podcast going,
Hmm.
and myself, I'm the oldest son of 9 kids. The oldest son, I am the fourth. Yeah, fourth. I'm the fourth child, the first of 5 sons. So it's 9 of us all together. So I come from a big family. Definitely love my family, and also from a 2-parent household. My mom and my dad were married. They actually got married on Christmas Day,
Wow.
and they were married until my mom passed away a couple years ago. Sometimes, I don't know if you ever lost someone, but when you lose some people like that time kind of fluctuates you, as far as sometimes it feel like it was yesterday, and sometimes it feel like it was 10 years ago.
Hmm.
Just kind of how it is when you wake up that day. It's like you wake
Yeah.
up one day and you miss them like they just left yesterday, and then you wake up another day and realize, oh, it's been a while.
Yeah.
So yeah, my mom been gone a little while, but the family's still good. So like I said, I'm one of 9, so definitely a big family. So how about you guys? Big families, small families?
Well, I'll say my family overall, my extended family is huge. As far as myself, I am married. I have a wife and 2 daughters. But yeah, my mother is one of 8, so she's actually the youngest of 8. So I have lots of uncles, lots of cousins, and that's just on my mom's side, and that's just, it goes further. Like, we're pretty connected with even my grandmother's, brother, my uncles and cousins on that side, and then their siblings. So even my grandparents' siblings, we're connected with all of their, family as well. So, and it's pretty similar on my dad's side of the family as well. So yeah.
Well, for me, I have a sister. Our immediate family is small, so it's just me, my sister, and my mom. But the same, lots of now cousins, my aunts and uncles. Several of them have passed, but lots of cousins on both sides of my family, aunts, uncles. The only living grandparent I have is my grandmother. Um, and yeah, family has been great as far as my podcast is concerned. Lots of my guests are my family members, which is fun. But yeah, so that's my family dynamic.
Yeah. Okay.
That's
I
what's
know.
up.
I have supposedly one day one of my cousins is going to be on here. As far as family wise, I haven't had any of my family on here, but one of my original podcasts, where I was a guest this year, was one of my cousins' podcasts. Shout out to Alicia and Kevin. My cousins, they have a podcast called Family Dynamics. And I
Mm.
was actually a guest on their podcast earlier this year before I even started mine. So that was cool. So I haven't had them on yet. I told them, come on. I'm waiting for them to get back with me. I have another cousin that supposed to be on here because he has a movement that he has going on that I think is pretty good. And I definitely want to shine a light on it when I can get in contact with him. But outside of that, but the family, I just sat down with one of my brothers the other day, and he's planning on releasing his own podcast soon. So I've been working with him, to get that set up and everything. So that's gonna be cool. But yeah, definitely family. My family is pretty large. Like even with my brothers and sisters, 9 of us. But my grandmother was the youngest of 12. So that's just her. That's just my mom's side.
Right, right.
But my dad's side, that's a whole nother side, a whole nother thing. And I know we're in the Chicagoland area, and so growing up, we was always told, do not go to the west side of Chicago and date anybody. You might be related to them, because that's what most of my family, was out stayed out west. So yeah, so that's a whole nother thing. But also, I know you mentioned about being married. I am married, or actually was married. I'm divorced now. So I've been married twice. I have one biological child, which is my daughter, and I have 5 stepsons. No, 4.
Okay.
4 stepsons. And that's been a challenge and a blessing at the same time. Them blended families. That's always a different dynamic. When you're dealing with other people's children whom you love as your own.
Yeah.
Right.
So definitely one of my things was, even though I'm the stepdad, always leaving that door open and that opportunity open for, the real dad, or should I say the birth dad? I don't want to say the real dad, the birth dad, to be able to, have his place in their lives as is supposed to be his place anyway. So that's a whole different dynamic. So I don't know if either of you have, Kesheaf, I know you mentioned that you have children, and Aisha, I know I didn't hear you mention if you had children, but any children, or anything you want to share, just talking about your own kids or anything like that?
I do have a daughter. She's 19 months. So she's a pandemic baby, yeah. And I was previously married, and at the time had 2 stepdaughters. But my ex-husband made sure that relationship did not continue after our divorce. So, you respect people's boundaries, and their mother was on board with what he decided. So, yeah.
So how do you deal with that now? Like, was it easy for you to move on, or was that like a transition, or like did he make it easy, or was it like
well, they didn't live. They live in a different state.
Okay.
So when everything was happening, I had contacted him to let him know that I was going to send them stuff for their birthdays, because their birthdays are kind of close in months. So I was just going to send like one big thing to both of them. And he was like, no, like, don't send them anything. Don't contact them. When you divorced me, you left them too. And so I'm sure that he has probably made comments to them about me in a negative light, to where they probably feel like I didn't want to talk to them anymore. But it was hard, I mean, I treated them like they were my kids, and but like I said, you have to respect people's boundaries. I initially was going to ignore him and continue the relationship. But one of my friends who is on the other side, she was like, no, just respect his boundaries. That's hard because you're a little bit more established, so you could probably do more for them than he can. Yeah. And so then they'll kind of start looking at him different, because you're continuing to do and he can't. And so I was like, okay, that makes sense. So I just took a step back.
Yeah. And I'm sure it will be interesting too when I don't know if they're adults right now, but like when they do become adults, they might end up reaching back out.
I know, and I think about that all the time because they're teenagers now. So they were young. which I think also kind of played a part in me stepping back, because it's like they really can't make decisions on their own.
Right.
So, if they ever decided to reach out to me at any point, I will welcome them with open arms.
That's
Yeah.
good stuff.
Well, I'll tell you what, that could very much be a possibility. So one of the things that I'm definitely grateful about, my daughter is a product of my first marriage. And so when I remarried, um, my second wife had the four sons, right?
Okay.
So that made us a blended family of five. And so
Mhm.
one of the things that my wife would often talk about was, not only her relationship with my daughter, but my relationship, with the boys. And I would tell her, let it be what it is, because as you show them love and express your love to them and your care for them, as they mature, is gonna come back.
Yeah.
Right.
And so now my baby is 18 now. You know what I'm saying? That's my daughter's the youngest of the five, and she just turned
Wow.
18 this year.
Yeah.
And one of the things that I'm so happy about is that relationship that she has, with her stepmom, because it's really been valuable. It's been conversations that they've been able to have that she wouldn't have with me.
Yeah.
Because she's daddy's little girl, to me, but she's also that in her eyes. So in her eyes, she's like, okay, I can't tell dad different things because I always want him to see me as his angel. So
Yeah.
they're able to have conversations that she wouldn't have with me. And those conversations, her stepmom don't necessarily tell me about unless it's something important. But just to have somebody that she can have those conversations with, if she's
Mhm.
not having it with her mom, and them having that relationship. And even with my sons, one of the things that they mom says now, like, man, I love how y'all relationships is now. I say, yeah, because they're young adults now. You know what I mean? So now they're able to see the things that you were trying to teach them and show them, growing up as young men. Now stepping into those shoes as being young men, you're able to see it from a different light, and then you
Mhm.
appreciate it. So our relationships now is definitely, they were still good when they were growing up, but it's definitely better now that they've become young men. And
Yeah.
Yeah.
so, it's definitely, if you've made that impact, that positive impact on them, I wouldn't be surprised, if you get that phone call one day, especially
Yeah.
now as teenagers, everybody got phones and
Yeah.
social media, everything. You're like, who is this? Be a surprise message, and that was one of the things that also with my daughter, because when after my divorce from her mom, they moved to another state,
Mhm.
and so one of the main ways that we stayed in contact with each other was through social media,
Yeah.
and especially when she got old enough to have her own phone and everything, it's like, okay, cool. We're definitely in contact, with each other all the time. So I definitely think that may be um, that may be a reaching out, what I'm saying? And I pray that it is, because obviously just by us having this conversation and you bringing it up, definitely it seems like you're open to that, to keeping that connection alive. And I just hope, maybe, who knows, maybe they'll see this or hear this,
Yeah.
and be like, let
Yeah.
me reach out, because they feel
Right.
the same. So yeah, and that was, even with that, that was kind of one of the things that led me, into starting my podcast, and even of having a way for people to heal from the different things that they're going through. Definitely, I've been married, I've been divorced, I've
Mhm.
had step kids. My daughter was a stepchild, and there's so many different avenues that people need healing in their lives, which led me to start, the Deal to Heal with E. James podcast, and to reach out to coaches or ministers or whoever, influencers, that's speaking of some kind of healing, um to bring that to people. And that's how it came to light, even with my concept
Mhm.
of my podcast. So how did, in you guys' own lives, what maybe were some of the things that you identified with to come up with the idea or the premise of what you wanted your podcast to be?
Well, yeah. Again, with me, it's I noticed now I'm a musician and an artist. I do I've been doing music or inclined to music. I'll say that since I can remember. Um, so people say a lot, like quite a bit, when they find out, what I do and they witness a little bit of what I do. They say, "Man, Kashif, I'm not creative like you." I hear that statement and it bugs me like that. It bugs me because the way that I view them, like they don't know that I've been observing them and that I've been, seeing a lot of things that I qualify as creative, but they just don't see it that way.
Hmm.
So, I find that a little bit interesting that it's really based on a person's perspective, in that, they could possibly benefit from having the perspective, like, don't isolate me as being creative just because I do music and art. Yes, I do music and art, but there's creativity in really in everything that we do, which it goes even deeper than, like I said, creative works and art pieces and dancing and singing. It goes it's more vast than that. um Creativity, to be honest with you, in the decisions we make, is from a create is that is a creative effort in itself. So the decisions we make starts in our imagination first, and depending on how we're contemplating that thing, then from that derives a decision, or a certain action is carried out from that, from what we've been thinking about for a minute. So that you're giving birth to a thought with action, and that in itself is creativity, because in your imagination is where things I mean, that's where the ideas come. You know what I'm saying? And really our lives are a mirror of our creative disposition. You know what I'm saying? So being creative is not just, writing a book, or, doing those things, those artistic works. Um, it just it goes way deeper than that. You know what I'm saying? Even negative things can be birthed out of creativity. You see what I'm saying?
Yeah, and definitely, I think, like you said, when it comes to being creative, it's kind of in the eye of the beholder,
Hmm.
because you know I think about, like, if you think about a chef, it's like, okay, you just cooking food,
Right.
but a chef can cook. You might have mashed potatoes and pork chops, which is a common dish,
Right.
but when he brings it out and he has the mashed potatoes with the little dripping lines on it with the gravy and whatever, that presentation is a creative presentation of a everyday thing. You know
Hmm.
what
Right.
I'm saying? But when you look at it, you know, uh, the average person may not think of that being creative, or think of expressing themselves creatively in that way.
Right.
And that goes into so many different other things with, like, poetry and designing things, and like a mechanic may build a car from scratch. You know
Right.
what I'm saying? Like that. That's to be able to do that, to have that vision and bring that vision to pass, and whatever it is that you're building definitely has is definitely is creative. And I
Right.
think that's, like you said, it's just getting people to see that, yeah, whatever that you put your hands to, you just have to find your creative niche in what you're doing, because everything that you do has a sense of creativity in it, because we were made from a creator who made us
Exactly.
in his image, right?
Exactly.
And so
Yes.
with his image and with his and I always say we were made in God's image, which also gave us God's imagination,
That's
because
right.
we
That's
came
right.
from God's imagination because He created us. So by us also having His imagination, that gives us the opportunity and the mind width to be able to create also. So
Yeah.
definitely, just people finding their niche, finding their creativity. So yeah, I'm
And
glad that you help people to see that, in their lives.
yeah, and God spoke that over humanity. You know what I'm saying? I think it's verse 26. I might be wrong about that, but Genesis chapter 1, verse 26. I know he said, and let us make man in our image. And then it says that he blessed them and said, let them multiply and have authority over the earth. So that, like those three things, he blessed them. He said to multiply and have authority. Like those things, first of all, like he's already demonstrating what he wants us to do. So the fact that he was like, let there be, let there be, let there be light and water and all this other stuff, right? The sky and the expanse. So he's modeling something that he wants us to model thereafter. So he's being creative. You see what I'm saying? In order for the matter and the things that we see to even be present. And then he had instructions for Adam and Eve as well. You see what I'm saying? So, and it was like name the animals. Um, so, and they had to be creative with that.
Mm-hmm.
But for God to say, for God to bless them, and then to say, and let them multiply, that's not just having kids. That's also saying, well, what do you have in your hands and how can you make it better? You know what I'm saying? How can you make it bigger? How can you, come up with inventions and advanced technology? And and the word authority actually is, well, the way that I think about it is, the root word of authority is the word author, which has to do with, I mean, as we know it, like a writer.
Mm-hmm.
And the first evidence that, I mean, that we see of anything having to do with words is actually speaking it before it was actually written. So we all have mouths. So that's one of the ways that we exercise our creative nature, good or bad, good or bad. Even negative circumstances stem from our creative nature. We are made, like circumstances are oftentimes birthed out of what we say and the way we speak. So this is that's the premise of what the podcast is about, is to kind of take our eyes off of the creative works in terms of, like, artistry, and let's look at our lives and acknowledge, like, am I where I want to be? And if I'm not where I want to be, well, how have I been speaking? How have I been thinking? What has been my actions? You know what I'm saying? Well, there's a possibility that I got myself, if even if I don't like it, I've got myself in a place that I don't like. So I need to examine my character and start bringing things into alignment.
Definitely, definitely. Miss Aisha?
So I, based off, you can kind of tell by my name, I had a blog, and I listened to podcasts for a long time. I've listened to them, and one of the podcasts that I listened to, um, the woman, she kind of talked about different like careers that you can have, and she would interview different women, and she talked with this woman who was writing a book or wrote a book, and she didn't know what she wanted to write a book about, so she just started blogging about stuff. And she paid attention to like her blog posts to see like really what am I interested in, like what do I keep writing about over and over and over again. um and so over the course of like 9 months, I think, she went back, looked at her blog posts, saw the ones that had like the most views, the most comments, um, and then the topics that she frequently talked about. And so that's how she came up with the idea to write her book. And so, like, forever, have been saying that I wanted to write a book. So I started this blog just to kind of see like where my interest lies, what are people really interested in hearing from me. Um, I talked about all kind of stuff like working out and, having different disabilities and fighting through, going through a divorce and online dating. Like it was just so many different topics. But through that, people would message me and they would tell me stories like, oh my God, this is what happened to me. Like, I'm so glad that you posted about your divorce because you just feel like no one else can understand what you're going thugh. And, your situations sound very similar. And so I would offer people to be like guest writers on my blog. And everybody was intimidated to actually put what they were saying on paper and like write it out.
Mm.
And I'm like, no one's going to judge you. Like, I don't even have to say that it came from you.
Right.
But I think that this story is good, like for other people to hear it. And so, I would not ever, like, no one would ever do it. So I toured around with doing a podcast and I started doing audio versions of my blog. So I would have it written, but I will also talk. So whatever was written down, you could also just hit play and then you would just be hearing me talk. And it like skyrocketed. Like the amount of people that actually stayed on the post increased, like the amount of time that they were there, the amount of clicks that I had, it increased. So I'm like, okay, clearly people don't mind hearing my voice. So I kind of try to figure out what I wanted to do for the podcast. I was going to do like a solo storytelling thing where I took the stories from my blog and kind of like expanded on them and like really went into depth. And then I was like, no, like I know I'm going to get bored of just talking and not having anybody to interact with.
Right.
So I just came up with the idea to have people come on and tell me stories about their life, kind of like my blog, but in, video audio form. So I made a list of just like a bunch of people that I knew where I'm like, oh, she went through this, or this person did this, they overcame this, they had this situation. And my list was like over 50 people of like personal people that I knew. And so I posted on Instagram and I was like, if you guys know anybody that you think has like a really good story to tell, send me some names of people so that I can contact them. And then my 50-person list was almost 75.
Wow.
And so I started like mapping it out. And obviously, like initially, I'm just like, how do I even go about doing this? So I interviewed my mom. We talked about, her job working in mental health. And when I went back to edit it, it was terrible. Like the audio was terrible. Like there was no saving it. So I ended up, my first episode was just me talking about what the podcast was going to be about. And then one of my friends reached out and was like, hey, I really want to talk about this situation. Like, are you available this week to record it? So I'm like, yes, yes, I am available. And so in talking to her, the podcast just flowed from there. I just started contacting people on my list, like, hey, are y'all free this weekend? Like just to record. Like one of them, I went home to see my family and I was hanging out with two of my friends and I'm like, wait, y'all want to record this real quick? Like our conversation. And we literally went in the back of my friend's house on her porch and we talked about, their plastic surgery journeys.
Mm.
Another one of my cousins, we all talked about having kids during the pandemic and like what that process looked like for us because each one of us was at different stages of our pregnancy during the pandemic. But through the interviews that I did, like I said, I've known everybody I've interviewed so far, and I've known a little bit about most of their situations, but I've learned so much about them just by doing these interviews. Like, people's situations, but they don't really go into depth when they're talking to you about stuff.
Yeah.
And they like freely open up. Like one of my friends was like, I feel like I just left therapy. Like, thank you. That was really
Good.
great because you are someone that I know, but people do need to hear this stuff. So I feel safe like talking to you, even though like when I'm talking, I'm not realizing that other people are hearing it,
Mm-hmm.
but
Mm-hmm.
I need to say it. So, that's kind of where I've gone. Tomorrow will be episode 30.
That's great.
Okay,
And
okay.
so, yeah, we I mean, we didn't even really say how we all met, but going through that course with Dave was so beneficial. Just learning the ins and outs. I had made so many mistakes in my podcast where I was just like, like you take the long way, and just learning those little shortcuts and the different tips that he gave were very beneficial. So yeah, that's my thing.
Cool, and definitely we want to give a shout out to David Shands and the Social Proof podcast, which is
Mm-hmm.
where we all met, and the launch your podcast challenge that we all were a part of, and that definitely, definitely gave me the boost that I needed, because I know I've shared on my podcast before how I even came up with the idea to, and I ain't gonna say I came up, it wasn't even my idea to start a podcast. But last year I was blessed to be on, I think, like 5 podcasts. Somebody reached out to me, a young lady reached out to me originally and asked me did I want to be a guest on her podcast. I had never done a podcast, and I'm like, oh, okay, cool. And then after I did hers, then I did maybe end up being like 5 after that. I'm like, oh, okay, I kind of like this podcast thing. And one of the guys that I did the podcast with, Dads on Purpose, is the name of their podcast. And Josh Ashford, I actually met Josh because he stays in Texas. So my daughter was graduating, and so I went to Texas because she lives in Texas. I went to Texas for her graduation, and I contacted Josh like, hey, I'm being in Texas, whatever, and we met up. And in our conversation of meeting, face to face for the first time, that was one of the things that he told me. He was like, you have a voice and you should probably have your own podcast. And so with that seed being planted, and also, with the experiences and that I was having with the podcast, with being a guest on different people's podcasts, I was like,
Oh,
okay.
sorry, y'all.
I was like, okay, let's see where that leads. And then, Dave came along with the challenge, and as well as Aisha said, that definitely was a wealth of knowledge that was released in that. And that also was the platform where we met, and so many of our other podcast friends, I would say, that we connected with, and started us all on this same journey, and it's a good journey, man. I'm really looking forward to it, and I definitely follow you guys and the other people that's in our little podcast group, and it's good and it's amazing to watch the progress that each of us is having in our own lanes, and using our own voices. And there's so many different voices for different things. Like I'm doing more like healing, and you're doing, creativity, and you're doing the life experiences. It's like so many different voices, but it's an ear for every voice, and I remember recently having this conversation with a friend of mine, and was talking to her because she doesn't have a podcast, but she has a platform. And she had been, I guess, different people had asked her about starting a podcast. And she was like, well, what would I say? Well, I'm like, you're already doing it.
Right.
You know what I mean? Like, you're already using your voice, in your group with those who you lead and aspire. Is just taking that same concept, that same voice, that same part of yourself, and sharing it with a bigger audience. And if it's one person that's going to listen, believe me, it's 101 other people that will listen, once they know that voice is out there.
Yeah.
And so I definitely, I'm amazed, and I'm happy when I'm watching you guys and our other podcasters. Someone releasing their first episodes, and like, yeah, I'm releasing my first episode tomorrow. And just it's exciting to watch that journey. And definitely when we get past that episode 6, what I mean?
Right.
It's always a good one.
That's
Like,
where I'm at.
oh man, got to get past that 6. And so I'm happy, and I'm optimistic, and also looking forward to the future, even of my podcast, and even where I see it going. I'm definitely tapping into more so this year, not only to have my platform, but as I think all of us should, and as we're doing here, but to be also on other podcast platforms,
Yeah.
sharing
Yeah.
the stage and sharing the mic with some of our friends. And I'm also trying to get, not trying, but I'm also getting more into the uh inspirational speaking or motivational speaking. I'm going to start doing some schools and some things like that, as well as developing that part. I got a I
That's
got an
awesome.
ebook I'm working on. I got a actual hardcover book that I'm working on. So I got a lot of things that I'm connected with, with this platform, that I'm definitely looking forward to, watching it grow. So do you guys have anything that, outside of your platform, or in addition to your podcast, that you're also working on, that you're looking forward to see grow, at this time also?
Well, with me, I'm really trying to expand. I am expanding in the course, the online like course world. I give lessons online like one on one, but I've I'm in the process of transitioning out of that, because yeah, I just want to record courses and guitar courses, art courses, as well as I'm adopting this obviously through the podcast, like creative coach or creative director, for people's visions and their destinies, just helping people like figure that out and helping people know that they're that they are creative. Creative are you? So I mean that's really what it is. My mission, or my vision rather, is I inspire people, or I help people find their creativity through using music and art. Um, However, I deal with them directly as well, going through the thought process of, just reflecting on when that creativity diminished in them. So, you know, I just want to be known as, yeah, that guy, Kashif. He helped to remind me or make me more aware that I'm creative, but he's also a musician and an artist. So that's it.
Okay.
For me, right now my focus is on the podcast. But so my goal for this upcoming year is to, now that I'm comfortable interviewing, I mean, I've listened to some of my first couple of episodes and I'm just like, oh my God, I'm like fumbling over my words, and I'm, like constantly. And um so, I've definitely improved with my interviewing skills. I'm not gonna lie, like it's taken a lot for me not to keep asking y'all follow-up questions because it's not my podcast. So I'm like definitely, kind of in that interviewer mode. Um, and I'm comfortable now. So
Yeah.
I have a list of people who I don't know, that I follow on social media, who, have kind of shared bits and pieces of their lives, whether it be through fitness or nutrition, or they've started businesses. Um, some people that are known like in a certain industry, like if I told you their name, you wouldn't know who they were. But because I follow like those certain types of groups, um, I know them. And
Mhm.
just being able to like branch out and feel comfortable to say, I would love to have you on my podcast to discuss this. Um, One of my guests coming up, I do know him, but like know him through someone else. So like we're not like buddies, we don't sit and talk. So that'll be like my first interview with someone that I'm not as comfortable talking to.
Right.
Um, so that's where I want to go. And by the end of this year, either a high profile influencer or someone who is famous, like a writer or an artist or something, is going to be on my podcast.
Yes. Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
Yeah, and you know what? It may be closer than you think, right? So, and I can't think of the guy's name. I can't think of the guy's name, but he's a motivational speaker. I can't think of his name, but one of the things that he talked about to in the speaking space to us as a student, right, is you are one contact away
Oh yeah.
from that your next person.
Right.
Yeah.
How you mentioned that, you don't, that guy through another person. It's
Right.
like you just one contact away.
Yeah.
And that's one of my hacks with my guests. Whenever when I reach out to someone and I ask them, do they want to be a guest, and they say yeah. When I send them the application, I ask them for 3 other people.
Yeah.
And then when I reach out to them 3 other people, I say, hey, you were referred to me by a former guest on my show. So that automatically usually gets me a yes. You know what I mean? And then when I contact them, I ask them for 3 more people. So that builds that list up for people that's, to be able to have a list of people that you want to interview.
Yeah.
But then that also adds you credibility for one, and then it gives you connectivity because they're looking at, hey, I was on the show, my homeboy was on the show. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
So kind of you start building that community of people that follow you and definitely support you. So
Right.
yeah, I love that. I love that idea. And it takes a lot of pressure off too when you're trying to find somebody to talk to. Because like you, when I first started, that was definitely my first 3 episodes was just me by myself. And that was one of the hardest things for me because I don't have a problem with talking, but when I'm just looking at a camera, it's like uncomfortable.
Yeah.
So my setup is a little different now because I actually have like a big screen. So even though I'm looking at you guys, I have a large screen in front of me. So it's not like I'm looking at a small person.
Yeah.
I'm looking at us, in the big screen. So it's like, oh, okay, like we just talking out the window or something.
Yeah.
It makes it easier, to have the conversations with other people. So, but man, I definitely appreciate you guys taking out your time to be here, to allowing my listeners to get to know you guys in a different way, and also for me to get to know you guys in a different way. So I'm gonna give each one of you the opportunity now. Again, tell our listeners where your podcast at, your social media handles, anything that you want us to know. Just give it to us, and I'll let y'all have the last words.
All right. So
go for it.
You want me to go first?
Yes.
Okay, so again, I'm Aisha Morgan. I am the Black Girl Blogger. On Instagram, you can find me at the Black Girl Blogger Podcast. My website is blackgirlbloggerpodcast.com. And on Facebook, I'm Conversations with the Black Girl Blogger podcast. So everywhere, just type in the Black Girl Blogger and it will definitely come up. My podcast, I also have a YouTube channel, which is Conversations with the Black Girl Blogger. And my podcast is on all streaming platforms, including Audible, because a lot of people don't know that you can listen to podcasts through Audible.
Yeah.
If you put it on the Google network or whatever.
All right.
Awesome. And I'm Kesheaf. The spelling of my name is Kesheaf. The name of my podcast is Creative RU. You can type that in. So it's Creative RU Podcast. That's on YouTube. That's on Spotify. That's on Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts. I need to make it to where it's all of them. It's not all of them, but it is those 3. And yes, my Instagram, Creative RU as well. But my other Instagram is Kesheaf Music. So remember that spelling and then just put music after it. And on YouTube, Kesheaf Music, and you'll find me there as well. So you'll just see all the stuff that I do. And KesheafMusic.com. That's another one. So thank you. I appreciate you having me, bro.
Yeah, and I appreciate you also, and definitely, if y'all like my intro and outro music, that's the man to go to, right?
That's what's up.
So again, man, I definitely appreciate you all for taking out y'all time and sharing the mic with me and allowing us this time to get to know each other a little better. You know what I mean? And definitely want to always be a part of you guys' growth and, your journey in this podcast world. And I definitely appreciate you all being here, because you could have been doing anything else, but you're here with me, and I definitely want you guys to know I appreciate it. And also our listeners definitely appreciate it. And I definitely appreciate our listeners for being here. Again, this is the Deal to Heal with E. James podcast. I'm your host, Earnest James, and I am on a mission to help people to deal, heal, and fulfill. Deal with their problems, heal from the pain, and fulfill their purpose. And I thank you guys for tuning in. So until next time, we will see you all next week. Hey guys, this is Earnest James, host of the Deal to Heal with E. James podcast. And I got a question to ask you. Could you buy me a cheeseburger? Better yet, could you buy me a value meal? Yes? Well, guess what? I don't need a value meal. However, for the cost of a value meal, you can support this podcast to keep us on the air. Just go to Patreon/Deal to Heal podcast and choose any one of the 3 tiers that's available. And if you just want to make a one-time donation, go to Kesheaf and make a donation to $EJames, the number 418. Make a one-time donation to the Cash App, or again, go to Patreon to support this podcast and keep us on the air. Thanks in advance. Be blessed. Thanks for listening to the Deal to Heal with E. James podcast. Remember to listen, like, subscribe, and share. This episode has been brought to you by Deal to Heal Teas. Put some inspiration in your situation. Wear an inspirational tea and be inspired all day. Let's go to dealtohealteas.myshopify.com. Remember, our mission is to help you to deal, heal, and fulfill. Deal with your problem, heal from the pain, and fulfill your purpose. Thanks for listening.